Hello, everyone. I hope everybody is doing well today. Welcome to Christ Talk. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Christ Talk on November 13th, 2023. Today we have Rhonda Brown here with us. Rhonda is a Christian poet. I want to give special thanks to Wingate TV, Transform You Media, Zach with Pack Channel, and Jay Stoyan with the Disability Channel for hosting our shows. Please be sure to share and subscribe to our page or wherever you found this. Now let's get to the show. Okay, like I said, I have Rhonda on here today with us, and she wrote a blog about being thankful. So before I get into that real lengthy, because a lot of people don't know really who you are, can you give us a little bit of background on you being a Christian, how you became a Christian, and then how you got into poetry? Please, Rhonda. Hello, Rhonda.
Hi. I grew up in Sunday school, but in a liberal Protestant denomination. I think my takeaway from that was Jesus loves you, so you'd better be good. And we never heard anything about salvation. I did not understand what the cross was about. I didn't understand my own sinfulness and my need for Jesus. Then in college, I ran into influences that led me to just say, I don't want anything more to do with Christianity. And so for a couple of years, I labeled myself an agnostic. And I think the Lord must have laughed and said, well, see how far you get. And I transferred to the University of Colorado my junior year. Got lost and very lonesome on that large campus, and accepted a friend's invitation to go to church with her. And for the first time, met people who seemed to be truly joyful about their Christian faith. And I was intrigued, and I was looking for social connections at that point in my life. I accepted an invitation to go to a Bible study on Romans. That was a dangerous thing to do. And, I was going to their university Sunday school class, and just gradually, well, one of the fellows who was in one of my English classes and also was at the Sunday school class on Sundays, always had this fat little book on the top of his stack of books. And I ran across it one day in the university bookstore. I said, oh, that's the book Dan always carries. It just happened to be Good News for Modern Man. So I bought a copy and began to read. And somewhere along the line also, I was introduced to the book by John Stott, Basic Christianity, and I read that. And all of that just gradually came together until I don't really understand all of this. But you have taken the initiative, reaching out to me, and here I am. So I became a Christian at the beginning of my senior year of college. And that was, golly, at least 55 years ago, maybe 60. I'm not sure. I haven't done all the math.
Right.
And I've had a career in children's Christian education, taught high school English at a Christian high school, did some writing for a missions.
Looks like we lost Rhonda there for a second. here she is coming back now. Go ahead, Rhonda.
Mm-hmm. I kind of fell into being a poet. So that's on my website. A little bit more of that story.
Yes. Just so everybody knows, right below my name is my apologetic website that I write about Christian information. And right below Rhonda's name is her website also. And it's got her book. Do you have your book available? Do you have it out where you can show it on the screen?
Right here.
Okay. It
There we
says,
go.
I weave a song of praise. And it's a book of all poetry that you've written. Not all of it, but some of the poetry you've written.
Yeah,
That would make a
most
great,
of it probably.
yeah, it would make a great gift for different people. Or if you like poetry yourself, it would make a great gift for yourself, you know. So, so tell us how you became a poet, and a Christian poet in particular.
I guess I've always enjoyed words and had some degree of gifting in that appeared probably or in high school. I discovered that I liked to write and could do it. Um, I wrote I wrote a poem in college. Our class was given an assignment to write a sonnet. So I wrote a sonnet. It was
What is a
terrible.
sonnet? What is a sonnet?
It's a 14-line poem, and deep. It's in iambic pentameter, which means the rhythm is pa pum pa pum pa pum pa pum pa pum. There, each foot is pa pum with the emphasis on the second beat, and
Okay.
there are 5 of them in a line. So it's in that meter. Um, and typically, there are a couple of different kinds. They rhyme quite strictly, and I don't remember offhand exactly how there's Spenserian and there's Shakespearean, and anyway, you had to follow a form quite strictly, and my sonnet was pretty terrible,
Okay.
and the fellow I was dating at the time was really derisive of my attempt. And I kind of shrugged and said, "So I'm not a poet. Who cares?" And I went my merry way and thought nothing of writing poetry for years and years. And then I think I wrote a dramatic monologue in the persona of a woman who had had an abortion,
Wow.
deeply regretted it, and eventually found forgiveness in Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah.
And over a very long period of time, as I went back to that monologue, it turned into a poem. And that was really the first poem I wrote.
Wow.
And I met some people who were members of the Arizona State Poetry Society and hadn't known about that organization before. And they encouraged me to join, and I did, and started going to the meetings of the small groups that were affiliated with it, and began to write. So that's kind of how it developed. And I get because I'm a Christian, that's what I end up writing about most often. That is what most occupies my head, and that's what I write about.
Very good. It's amazing how abortion has touched every American in our country and worldwide also. but it's really amazing how far it's gone. And God's going to have to sort all this out, because I thought I knew, and my judgment and stuff like that, but it's just amazing. My wife and I were actually a part of a couple abortions ourselves before we became Christian. And we had to really ask God for a forgiveness for that path we took. Her on her own, and me on my own, paying for different things, and girlfriends and stuff. It just, it's an ugly thing, but I'm very easy to talk about it, because we have become very fierce anti-abortionists now. So, very good. So one of the things I wanted to talk about was the blog that you wrote. And I just, when you sent it to me to put on the website, by the way, I designed Rhonda's website for her. And I post up her blogs for her also, and the different podcasts that she has done. And we called this one, I actually took a name, Attitude of Gratitude, for this podcast and this blog. And I'm going to read the first paragraph here that Rhonda wrote. It says, "It's November, a Thanksgiving month, a time when we take some time to assess the blessings that we have been poured out on us, and what God called us to do with them, which is to share them with others." I'm going to stop right there real quickly. I just got off a 4-way phone call with my 2 sisters and my wife, and we were praying because both my sisters are going through some operations. They're both in their 80s. I'm the youngest of my 2 sisters, and so we prayed for each other's physical. But then I brought it back to, because I knew I was coming on this podcast with Rhonda about Thanksgiving. So then I prayed about being thankful for all the blessings that God has done in our lives, many of which we have forgotten about, but he still was faithful to take care of that. So poetry is a big deal, especially in the chaos that we live all around us and in different parts of the world today. Especially if you think about what's going on in Russia and Ukraine, and now most of all, dealing with Israel and the Gaza Strip. All that chaos there. Sometimes we need to be centered and brought back up and talk about how God has dealt with us. So, can you talked about a Dr. Bob Arter? Is that how you pronounce it? Okay.
No,
Can you talk about him from the First Presbyterian Church in Boulder, Colorado?
Yeah. He was the senior pastor at the church where I became a Christian. Another person was teaching the Sunday school class I went to, but I began to go to the church services also. So I was hearing his preaching. He was a joyful man. I think, and that would be one of the first adjectives I would come up with to describe Dr. Bob. He was joyful. And the phrase attitude of gratitude I stole from him.
Yeah.
He was constantly admonishing his parishioners to have an attitude of gratitude. So I think he modeled it. Home to me, sitting under his teaching for 4 to 6 years total, I guess. Gratitude is a choice.
Right.
We choose it. And it's an obligation because we have been given so much. And even at the maybe the lowest points in our lives, we still have so much to thank him for. And of course, the biggest thing of all is that we thank him for Jesus, that he
Absolutely.
saw fit to break into our human existence, live with us, and not only experience some of the trials of human life, but to experience the worst one of all, an absolutely excruciating death. And all of that to pay the penalty of our sin. I just recently memorized the 53rd chapter of Isaiah. And of course, we hear those words often in church context, but he was pierced. He was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him. And that substitution, his taking our place, comes through so clearly in that chapter that was written hundreds of years before Jesus showed up on the scene.
Right.
And it's just, I am so thankful he did that for me. So that's the very biggest thank you. And then
Yes.
there's the fact that I live in the United States and I still have more religious freedom than just about anybody else in the world, even though it is threatened sometimes, even here.
Yep.
Um,
Yep. Yep.
and we are incredibly prosperous. My husband and I need health care, and we can get it. We can afford to pay for it, and it's accessible. We get in the car and drive to the doctor's office. Unlike some around the world who have to hike for days, or a missionary clinic that's miles away. And at the missionary clinic, where they may not have all that you need anyway. So we have access to health care. We have way more than we need to eat.
Yeah.
So there's just an enormous amount to be grateful for.
Yes. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to do a podcast and interview people like you, Rhonda. I learned so much about different people, and I do podcasts with scientists. I do podcasts with Messianic Jews. My grandson, who writes for the apologetic website that we have, I interview him because he just graduated with a degree in theology. So it's amazing that all the different people I come into contact, especially with the podcast, because I learned so much. I had no idea about sonnets. I had no idea about the different prose that you do with poetry, and we're learning a lot from you, Rhonda, when it comes to that. And I was never a big fan of poetry until I met you and all the poems that you have written. And I sit back and I contemplate what you're saying and having to say. It's just really remarkable. So thank you for that. I thank you for all that you're in my life, Rhonda. So there you have it. And you were talking about Isaiah, and Isaiah is a huge place. It looks like we lost Rhonda. I think she'll come back here in a minute. Um, Hopefully she'll come back in. So I'm going to keep talking for a minute till she does. Sometimes she has a problem with connection on her Wi-Fi. So hopefully she'll come back in here. Um, Anyways, it's just amazing all the different creative things that gifts that God has given us, and that we can use it to promote His gospel to different places. So that's where we're at with that. So I'm waiting for Rhonda to come back in here because she wrote some other interesting things here. I'm going to read some of the stuff till we see if she can get back in. It says, when we think that the resources available to us are limited, we are reluctant to let go of them. Here she comes now.
I don't know
Hi.
what happens.
You just dropped out. Now you're back. So I just kept going, and I started to talk about when we think of the resources available to us are limited, we are reluctant to let go of them, but we trust that God has unlimited resources to share with us, and we can freely share with those around us. Can you explain that a little bit? This was Gary.
Hogue.
So can you tell us who Gary is, and then expound a little bit on what he was saying?
We met Gary Hogue when he was vice president of the Denver Seminary years ago. And I'm an alum of the seminary, so it was Gary's job to contact alumni and encourage them to give back to our alma mater. And we got to be friends with Gary. Then he moved on. He started. He blogs as the Generosity Monk, and I'm not sure what all he was doing in the period of time after he left Denver Seminary, and he was doing that blog. I don't know what else he was doing. He now is the president of an organization called Global Trust Partners, and they are an international equivalent of the Evangelical Council for Financial Accountability, which exists here in the United States and encourages missions organizations and churches to be absolutely transparent in their financial dealings, so that people who are giving to that ministry know what's happening to their dollars.
What is the name of that one again?
The international organization is Global Trust Partners.
So partners, and would that be under a .com or a .net? Do you know? That's okay. I'll look it up.
I don't know whether it's .org or .com.
Okay, I'll look it up.
And as I said, it's an equivalent to the ECFA here in the Council for Accountability. financial accountability. I can't talk. But they're helping different countries around the world now to establish networks of ministries who help one another by setting standards for accountability, exploring ways to encourage believers to invest in kingdom work, to get us to dig into our pockets and assist these groups that are trying hard to do kingdom work. So that's been something that I've been exposed to for quite a few years. And
Okay,
I guess
is that the organization that they try to get a lot of pastors to sign up for, and a lot of television evangelists sign up for to be accountable for their finances?
ECFA might be doing that. I don't know. As I don't think that's the group that GTP is targeting. They're working a lot with nonprofits, Christian ministries in different countries, Christian charities, those kinds of groups.
Okay. Very good. Yeah, there needs to be that accountability out there, because if you have followed anything about Christian churches and Christian so-called pastors, there's been no accountability. So this is probably a very, very good thing for the pastors to sign up for. Then you talked about, let me see, what it is meant in the text by opening the hand wide with respect to those that are able is explained in Deuteronomy 15:8. Thou shalt open thy hand wide unto him, and shall surely lend him sufficient for his want, and in which he needeth. And then you talked about John Edwards in Christian charity, or the duty of charity to the poor, explained and enforced in 1732. Can you talk about that just a little bit?
Well, Jonathan Edwards was a Puritan minister back in the 1700s here in the United States, before we were the United States. And Gary quoted him in his blog just very recently, and Edwards was talking about the Deuteronomy passage that you just read. And the fact that he said, there's just no question. We as Christians are called to respond liberally to the needs of those around us when we can meet that need. And he basically is saying, you have something to give. Don't be chintzy with it. Give generously. So if you have a $20 bill in your wallet, think about just handing them that $20 bill instead of the change you may have in your pocket. And I read an interesting story online today that surprised me. It was by Katharine Hepburn, of all people, the actress.
Rhonda, can you hold up a second? We're coming up to the 30-minute mark, and I have to do a thing on our sponsor. Okay.
Sure.
We have a sponsor on our podcast here, and it's called Stanley Products of Stanley. And they make all kinds of different cups and things that you cook with for when you go camping, and all kinds of things. And so the most sustainable products are the kind that never need to be thrown away or replaced. Stanley has created reusable, built for life products for over 100 years, reducing the demand for disposable products that end up in wastewater and streams. Stanley brand has a rich 100-year history, born from an inventor, William Stanley, who forever changed the way hot drinks are consumed. In 1913, he refused a vacuum insulation with the strength of steel in one portable bottle, inventing the all-steel vacuum bottle we know and love today. So if you go to stanley.com, and you can see all the different products that they have. They're really top of the line and very, very strong products. They have frying pans and all kinds of different cups for drinking coffee, tea, and different things. And they also have like a thing that you can portable things to transport food with. Anyway, so that's for my sponsor. I thank you for that. Rhonda, can you go back and start over from that last thought you had?
Sure. I read this online just this morning, and I thought, how interesting. Katharine Hepburn, the very famous actress, was writing about going to the circus with her father when she was a child. I think she said she was around 8, 9, 10 years old at the time, somewhere between 8 and 10, probably. And she was excited. She'd not been to a circus before, I think. If she had, she was still very excited about getting to go. And she and her father were standing in line at the circus to buy their tickets. And in front of them was a family with 6 children, the mom and dad and 6 kids. And the children were just chattering away about their excitement at going to the circus. They'd never been before. They were really excited. She said it was obvious they didn't have a lot of money, but she said they were neatly dressed and clean. And the father got up to the ticket window, and the clerk said, "Well, what can I do for you?" And he, with pride in his voice, evidently said, "I want 6 children's tickets and 2 adult tickets. We are going to the circus." And so the clerk added it all up and said, "Okay, your bill is this much." And the father's whole body just sagged. He didn't have enough money. And there some conversation went on, and her father, Katharine Hepburn's father, pulled a $20 bill out of his pocket, dropped it on the ground, picked it up, and nudged the man in front of him and said, "Sir, this bill fell out of your pocket." And the man realized what was going on, but he accepted the bill, and he suddenly had enough money to take his whole family to the circus. And he was very, very grateful. He realized that Hepburn's father was giving him a gift, but in a way that would cause minimal embarrassment for him. And Hepburn said she and her father turned around and went home because that was the $20 that was going to take them to the circus. But she said she always, always remembered the lesson that we need to give, that it gives something back to us when we give. I imagine she got to go to circuses some more times in her life. But that memory just stayed with her of her father helping this family to be able to do something that they were so anticipating and were going to be so dreadfully disappointed if they weren't able to do it.
That's a powerful story.
Yeah, I read it and went, wow.
Yeah. I'm sure it's happened throughout the ages with a lot of different people. God nudges us sometimes. Sometimes he's got to do more than a nudge, because there are so many people without. And in this day and age, all the things that are going on all around us, this is a big deal. So this is a big story, powerful story that you're talking about. Thank you for sharing that with us. I think she would be surprised at how her story has been picked up and repeated throughout the years to different people.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're getting a sampling of it. Audrey Hepburn was probably one of my favorite female actresses. Is she still alive? Do you know?
No, I think she died quite a while ago.
Okay. Yeah. So it's very interesting. I know you have a poem on the blog that you wrote. But let's hold off on that for a couple of minutes because we still have about 20 minutes left on our podcast here. So what else would you like to talk about that you had, that you wrote for the blog?
Good question. I think I really didn't make a lot of different points in the blog. I think urging people to have that attitude of gratitude. And as I said, that's something we choose and we practice. It's easy to fall out of it, to get frustrated and think, oh, woe is me, this is going wrong and that is going wrong and I don't have what I need. We do have what we need. We've been promised God's provision. In one of Jesus' discourses, he says to the people, the hairs on your head are numbered, and a sparrow doesn't fall without God noticing it, and you are worth more than many sparrows. So we're told that God cares for us, provides for us, and we can rely on that. And I've never had occasion to be hungry because there wasn't any food available. That has never happened to me. There are people around the world to whom it happens regularly. So we just have so much to be thankful for.
Yes,
I guess one of the things I didn't write these in the blog, but before I wrote my blog, I did a concordance study on give thanks and made a long list of the verses that time after time after time say, give thanks to the Lord, give thanks to the Lord. I will give thanks to the Lord as long as I live. And Psalm 104 has a verse about singing praise to God. The psalmist says, I will sing to God all my life. I will sing praise to my God as long as I live. And we're called to praise, we're called to give thanks, as long as there's breath in us to do it. So I guess that's one of the points. I had an experience years ago where someone helped us. We had a period of several months when Bill was out of a job, and we were coming up on Christmas, and we didn't have enough money to pay the rent. We were renting at the time. To do about gifts for our boys. And I know Bill said, well, we're going to have to move. We can't pay the rent. We're going to have to move. And I protested that we were not going to move just because we didn't have the money to pay the rent this month. We were going to stay put and wait it out. And he was insistent that we had to move. But we went to our small group from church that week. And after the meeting, the wife of the couple who led the group handed us an envelope. She said, I know it's kind of a rough time for you guys right now, and we want to help. So we carried the envelope out to the car, and Bill started to look inside, and then he handed it to me, and he said, we better not do anything with this right now. There's quite a lot of money in it. And he said, I don't want to be messing with it here in the dark. So we drove home, opened the envelope, and counted out the money. They had given us $400, which then paid rent and left some over for Christmas gifts. And my husband has not often been reduced to tears, but he was very close that night. We both were. It was just, it was the generosity of our friends that helped us in a difficult time. And they were responding to the nudging of God to provide for their brother and sister in Christ.
Yep. And it comes from many different directions too. I can also think of one Christmas where my wife and I finally got back together because we were divorced from each other. And then he opened the door for us to come back together and get remarried. And that happened. I was an atheist till I was 30. And so this was a couple of years after that. I had actually went to Oregon and became a born again Christian. That's a whole nother story that I'll get into in a different time. But I remember on that Christmas, we didn't have much at all. And the church we were going to came us and gave us a big care package that had a turkey and all the fixings. We had to do it ourselves and make it, but that was great. And that same Christian, I was working in a location, and one of the guys that worked in there invited me over to his house. And I had 3 boys, and they were all in the ages of 12 to 6 years old. And he had 3 bicycles, used bicycles. And he said, this is for your family. Take them home. So I actually took them, and before Christmas, I tore them all apart, cleaned them up, took all the rust out, and then repainted them, and then gave them to my boys for Christmas. They look brand new, but I had spent a lot of work on them too. But the mere fact that this family gave us these bicycles for my boys, and all the boys, even to this day, because my oldest is 50 now and my youngest is 42, they all remember that Christmas. So it's amazing. It's probably one of the most favorite Christmases I ever had, in the fact that we were able to give each other these gifts. And when I gave it to them, those boys rode around that whole Christmas afternoon on their new bicycles. They were just everywhere. They just loved them. So you just never know, even if it's a used type of gift, somebody may refurbish it and make it something that's brand new to them. So that was a very wonderful Christmas, just like what you had there too. It put me to tears when they showed up at our door the day before Thanksgiving, actually, Christmas, day before Christmas, Christmas Eve, with the food we were going to make the next day. And then about a week before that is when about 2 weeks before that is when I got the bicycles. So every night after work, I worked on the bicycles, tearing them apart, washing them, doing all kinds of work to them. So it is what it is, Rhonda. And we're thankful for the provision that God gives us. And I remember coming very close to tears myself. So great stories, great stories. So before we go real far, I want you to read the poem that you sent called Confession, and then maybe explain what that poem meant to you and what you were trying to get across. Can you read Confession to us?
Sure. Let me find the right page. Yeah, here we go.
This one's in your book.
It's in my book, yes. The epigraph is from my very favorite poet, Gerard Manley Hopkins. And thou couldst see me sinning. It's from a poem about Christ stretching his arms out and dying. And he said, and thou couldst see me sinning. When you stretched out your arms and died, you saw the days when with barren heart I have looked the other way from suffering. You saw the greedy grasping of what I thought I needed for myself when I could have done another good. You heard the harsh and unkind word, knew that I would not be in love with truth when it pointed to a path that I found hard. You knew the half-truths and omissions for what they were. You could see me sinning. And yet, you stretched out your arms and died. I bow, O Lord, who sees me sinning, and give you thanks.
Wow.
And I think we, as we learn generosity, we learn to be more and more thankful for the resources God puts in our hand, for the freedom of the gift of forgiveness that he gives. We learn and grow from our generosity. So it's, I found another quote that Gary Hogue had put in his blog at some time several years ago. And he quoted Henry Nouwen, who says, what little we give away multiplies. This is the way of God. The little love we have, the little knowledge we have, the advice, the little possessions we have are given to us as gifts of God to be given away. The more we give them away, the more we discover how much there is to give away.
Wow.
So that's what Gary has been teaching for years. What we've been soaking up from him and from our own experience, that when we give, we don't miss it. We are abundantly provided for. So anyway, that's part of what we are learning, and I really, I'm very grateful. Giving was not a part of my life early in my Christian life. I didn't get any teaching about giving. My philosophy was God would not expect a starving student to be giving our money away. Bill, on the other hand, got some good teaching and began very early to tithe. And to our shame, we didn't really talk about finances that much before we were married. But when we came home from our honeymoon on the first Sunday that we prepared to go to church, Bill handed me the checkbook and said, "Now we're going to tithe." And I said, "We're going to what?"
Wow. Wow.
And I was willing enough to follow his leadership to say, "Oh, okay." So we started from the very first of our marriage a habit of tithing. And I am very, very grateful that he established that for us. And over the years, we've moved beyond that in giving more than that. And I think if you add up the scriptural pattern in the Old Testament, taking a tithe and then taking the various offerings that the Jewish people were called upon to give, it came to about a quarter to a third of their resources. So 10% is a very minimal baseline. And we aren't under a legalistic obligation to do that as Christians. But I'm convinced it's a very good baseline to start with in our giving and then move forward from there.
Doesn't it say somewhere in scripture that God says, "Test me"?
Yes. Malachi.
Yeah.
Bring the full tithe into the storehouse and see if I will not pour out on you. And I don't remember the rest of the verbiage exactly, but he's saying, I am going to open the doors of the storehouse and dump blessing on you.
Wow. Dump it.
So,
I think, especially in this day and age, people do not have any understanding of that. God can dump anything he wants. He can pour out because he has unlimited supply. And sometimes he's got to get human beings to come together, and that's the hardest part. I think the biggest miracle of all that God is able to do is getting human beings like us to get on the same page, because human beings have their own way of doing stuff that is outside God's parameters. but instead of always asking for, and sometimes you need to ask for specific things, but sometimes
Mhm.
it just needs to be given in God's hands to be creative. And he will make you laugh at how creative he is and how he does stuff. It's just like, oh my gosh. I know throughout my life and my wife's life that he has done so many things from so many directions that it's just really hard to keep track of it. But that's the God we serve. You
Mhm.
know, we live in a universe that is unbelievably huge. And that's one of the things how I met Rhonda was in our RTB, Reasons to Believe. It's a science group that we meet once a month. And we talk about all kinds of things in science because we realize that God is behind science and how all this stuff comes together. And then you look at it, and if this is the God that created, there are more stars in our solar system. There's millions of them, billions, than there are grains of sand on the planet. And it goes 10 to the 10th power. But if you look at it, how many galaxies there are in our universe, there are more grains of sand again. And you're talking about 10 to the 100th power. It's just amazing how huge our universe is that he made. And when I look at that, it just confounds me that this is a God that actually is so enormous that he loves me as an individual, a separate, small person like me. Why would he care about me? And I realize that he does. He loves us unconditionally. All these grains of sand he loves. So that brings me up out of the muck and mire when I start looking at that and start looking at the universe. I'm like, oh my gosh. So I'm just very glad that I've met Rhonda in our RTB, local RTB, which is in Tempe, Arizona, right across the street from the college. They meet and I can't, so I go on Zoom with them. And some of the things that we discuss and talk about, to me, is just another way of worshiping God. When we talk about all these scientific things that he put into place and got in starting, um, I just love the group that we belong to, and I've learned so much. So we got 2 minutes here, Rhonda. I'm going to come back and say that I will see you next month. I'm going to read off something here real quick. Um, Thank you, everybody who was here with us. Our next episode of Jaws Christ Talk special will be aired in December when Rhonda will be back with us. Be sure to subscribe to our channel or page where you found us and check out our website to find out about this and other shows. Once again, I'll repeat what I said earlier. Underneath my name is a website for my apologetic website, and we've written lots of blogs on there about the tougher things. I wrote a blog about what makes an atheist, and a bunch of other things that you may find very interesting. Under Rhonda Brown, under her name is her Poet Monk. You can find her book in there, a link to the book. And you can also find a bunch of poems she's written and some of her thoughts on a lot of different things. So Rhonda, it's been a real blessing again today, and I'm very thankful for you and coming on the program. So that's it for today, for this month, and we will see you next month. Thank you again, Rhonda.
Take care. Appreciate these times together. They're special.
Yes, they are.
So let's see, where's my